at 2:30 in the morning, he was absolutely petrified. He told me it was like wickedness manifesting in his room. Wickedness manifesting. He was paralyzed with fear. There it is again. Overwhelmed with fear. The currency of these beings is fear. He couldn't move. He was paralyzed. And he began to say the blood of Jesus over and over again. And as he did that, the entity vanished in front of his face. I mean, literally just began to slowly vanish and move back into that other dimension. And this, of course, is what we see, when we examine these ancient texts. We see exactly this, that what we're dealing with, in my opinion, and all my other interviews with you guys have said the same thing, we're dealing with fallen angels that have somehow manifested themselves back on earth. They're here again, fulfilling prophecy, by the way, and they're up to no good. They're up to a lot of no good. And that's what we see when we begin to examine each individual part of it, whether it's the abduction phenomena, alien implants, cattle mutilations, the crop circle phenomena, the contactee phenomena, all these different, parts of the whole. We realize that it's very nefarious. It's evil. And, in my opinion, it is the coming great deception. And of course, the Raelians are on the vanguard. They are the poster boys, as you say, of the UFO movement.
Yes. Do you think that they are using some kind of superior technology, or do they have some kind of spiritual aspect to them that make them kind of or manage so they can kind of gain this level of power, I guess, over us? What do you think, Lynn?
I think it's both. I think that they absolutely have nuts and bolts hardware, craft that flies around. Absolutely. It's not like Project Blue Beam or a holograph. It's not mass hypnosis. In other words, here's something to think about. Why wasn't that, let's just take, for instance, let's just kind of strip something down and try to expose the truth of what we saw on that CNN footage in the inaugural. Now, there are many people, for instance, well, let me back up. One of the people I interviewed for the book, The Alien Interviews, Lynn Dickey, who was a contactee, would go out in the sky, and she would first of all be told telepathically, go out, point your camera up, and you're going to take pictures of our craft. Lynn would go out and wouldn't see anything. There'd be nothing there, okay? And she would begin to take photographs. As she would develop these, they were digital photographs. Lo and behold, there's the craft. Now, this is exactly the phenomena that fits into what we saw in the inaugural. A million people are standing there. No one sees this thing, yet it's caught on camera. The camera sees it, right? But the people there don't see it. They're unaware of it. And it's exactly what we have with Lynn Dickey. This is exactly the phenomena that she saw. And if that craft that manifested during the inaugural, if it's real, that speaks volumes. They're becoming bolder. They want to be seen. The Stevensville UFO flaps, we talk about that in the book, in the Alien Interviews. We interviewed Ricky Sorrell, who saw this thing up close and personal. The craft was at least a mile wide, perhaps 2 miles wide. He looked in all directions, and he could not see the end of the craft. That's a mothership, folks. That's a mothership. And if you want to see how big a craft is that's a mile wide, we have nothing, not even remotely that large in our skies, even blimps, size of a football field maybe, but they're not a mile or 2 miles wide. The craft in Phoenix, Arizona in 1997 estimates between 1 and maybe as large as 2 miles wide that flew over Phoenix silently in the span of, took a long time to fly over Phoenix. The witnesses that come on the record that Dr. Lynn Katai interviews, the craft flew right over their head, and they saw the same phenomena that Ricky Sorrell saw almost 10 years later, that there was some sort of the air underneath the craft undulated, was being disturbed, mirage-like. Ricky Sorrell uses the word mirage-like, that waving of the air. The witness back in 97 in Phoenix, Arizona, uses, the air was moving underneath the craft. It undulated underneath the craft. 2 different witnesses, separated by hundreds of miles apart, and not only that, they're separated in time of almost 10 years, seeing the same type of craft, large, silent craft directly overhead, and seeing the same type of air disturbance that they record. They're not sure what they're looking at, but they're using their own words. The air is waving. It was mirage-like. It was moving, it was waving. Very great similarity there. So once again, I bring it back. The phenomenon is burgeoning. It's not going away. We need to discuss it, folks. We need to start talking about it. We need to get the government of the United States, certainly, which is the leading power of the world, to come forward and to say that this is not, stuff of backwoods someplace and with people that have had too much to drink or on psychedelics or, have fourth grade education or whatever. These are people that have studied this thing, looked at this thing, and at the tune of 300 to 600 witnesses per month, it's not going away. It's not going away. It's time to quit ridiculing it, quit acting like a bunch of morons, and start looking at the phenomenon. Because when this thing hits, when they finally reveal themselves, and of course I have my own theory on that, when that will be, it will cause great consternation on this planet. It will also create a complete change in worldview in most people, and that will be done instantaneously.
Really? So do you think that this will be an event that happens basically overnight?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that?
When they find, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, when they reveal themselves, it's all or nothing. It'll be like 2-3 mile wild craft, 2 or 3 mile wide craft over London, Paris, United States, Washington, maybe LA, maybe one in New York, one in Beijing. They're going to pick and choose, certainly in the EU, in several places.
When do you think it will? When do you think it will happen?
Well, in politics, prophecy, and the supernatural, I give some sort of a timetable for that. Not a date setter, but I believe from my research. And look, I could be wrong in this. I'm one guy. I don't have all the answers, and I don't, basically tell people that I have all the answers. Here's a scenario,
right.
Okay?
Yes. And
it deals with, my book that precedes the alien interviews, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural. We know that prophecy is there. We know that biblical prophecy is 100% accurate 100% of the time. Let me just give you a quick example before I move on from there. We realize that it said very specifically that, let's say, in the end days, in the last days, that the Jews would be regathered from the four corners of the earth and reestablished in their ancient homeland of Israel, never to be removed again. We see after the absolute horrors of the Holocaust, we see a mass immigration into Israel from Europe and frankly from all different four corners of the earth. And in a day, the nation of Israel is voted by the UN, and it becomes a nation instantly. The Arabs attack, and here we go. We have what we have today in between Hamas and Israel, which is a whole other story. But we see that the prophecy of that is being fulfilled. Concurrently with that prophecy, one more prophecy we can look at is that Jerusalem would be trampled over until the times of the Gentiles is finished. Okay, that prophecy was uttered about 2,000 years ago. In AD 70, Titus and the legions came down and destroyed Jerusalem, taking it from Jewish control and Jewish hands, passing it over to the Gentiles. And from that time period, through the Crusades, through the rise of Islam, through the Ottoman Turkish Empire until modern day, 1947, or 1948, when Israel becomes a state, a nation, we see that literally Jerusalem was controlled by the Gentiles, a non-Jewish portion. In fact, until the 1967 war, Jerusalem is controlled by the Gentiles. And only in the 67 war is it finally regained by Israel, thus fulfilling that prophecy to the nines. It's very specific. The specificity in that prophecy is something that you can just look at and read, and if you know your history, a person can ascertain, a reasonable man can go, yeah, that's interesting. 2,000 years, and now we must be living in that time. Israel's a nation, and now Jerusalem has been restored. Okay, let's get back on point. All that to say that I believe that the next prophetic event, big one, will be the Ezekiel 38-39 war, which speaks of the very nations we see hurling nothing but vitriol and death threats to the nation of Israel. I speak, of course, of Iran and Ahmadinejad, saying things like, Israel is a dry wood tree soon to be uprooted and thrown into the sea. Israel is a cancer soon to be irradiated, and on it goes from the rhetoric from Ahmadinejad. We also see the first nation mentioned in that prophecy, Magog, Russia, selling the S-300 anti-missile systems to the Iranians and backing the Iranians to the hilt, selling arms to Syria and Libya, docking its ships in the ports. It is literally, the prophecy, in my opinion, is about to be fulfilled. when this war happens, not if, when this war happens in the Middle East, it will set about the greatest climate of fear that this planet collectively has ever known. And let me elaborate.
Mm-hmm.
The Israelis will use their neutron bombs against this overwhelming force which is going to come up against them. I mean, overwhelming amount of soldiers and arms are going to come up against Israel. They'll have no choice but to use the neutron bomb. We, the rest of the world, will be watching CNN and the Fox News channel and Sky News and all this other stuff in absolute horror. Remember, it's not 9/11 or the UK train bombings or the subway bombings or the Mumbai massacre, the more recent one. This is like a decimation of millions of people. Bombs going off, nuclear war.
Mm.
This will set such a ripple of fear through every economic system, every government, every household on this planet, as people wonder, are we literally on the verge of mutual assured destruction? Are we going to blow ourselves up completely off this planet, go into some sort of a nuclear winter? Is this it? Am I going to wake up in the morning and be irradiated? Okay? And from that climate of fear, which is what we've talked about earlier, this will manifest the so-called, and let me just read that little Raelian thing. Now that you are mature enough to understand this, we would like to enter official contact through an embassy. And this is what they're going to do. At this point in time is when they'll manifest. And it will be all at the same time. All these ships over different parts of the world will all see it together, and it'll be the alien gospel. And people will embrace the lie. Now, I realize that sounds like science fiction, and yet, when we start to connect the dots, when we look at, craft that flew over Phoenix, Arizona 10 years ago, we know they're out there. Mile-wide, 2-mile craft. What about the 2-mile-wide craft that flew over the English Channel in 2007? What about that one? Or the 1.5-mile-wide craft seen in Stevensville? What about the size of the craft during the inaugural, if in fact that was real?
Right.
Or the larger craft that flew over the UK and in Wales in the summer of 2008. The thing's not going away, folks. And all it's going to take is a few of these things to just sit there. Are you familiar with Blossom Goodchild and the October 14th prophecy?
Nope.
Okay. She made waves on the internet by she's a trance medium. She works with what I call a familiar spirit. So, again, how do we ascertain, Miss Goodchild, whether what you're in contact with is benevolent or malevolent? And as Andy of The Edge AM, who interviewed me, came up with this great analogy. If it's 2:30 in the morning and someone knocks on your door, you just don't let them in. You find out who the heck they are and what the heck they want. And unfortunately, most of these people who have contact with so-called benevolent entities never stop and try to discern with what they're experiencing is, how do you know whether you can trust these guys?
Yeah,
well,
that's true. Yeah.
She was set up. And she went on record in innumerable videos that are on YouTube, Blossom Goodchild, saying that she was told on October 14th, a ship of great size would manifest over some country. She said the Southern Hemisphere.
I think I remember this, actually. Okay, yeah, carry on. Yeah.
And this caused a great amount of emails, and people were looking at her site, hits off the charts, and people believe this. We were all looking. I immediately started blogging and saying, this woman is deceived. This is not going to happen. These entities are setting her up. You can go back and look in the blog. It's right there. They lie all the time. This is not going to happen. Sure enough, October 15th Blossom Goodchild comes on the record. She is absolutely disillusioned. The poor woman is just beside herself because she realizes she's been duped. And in the October 15th video, she says, I asked him repeatedly, is this going to happen? Are you really going to manifest? And they assured me that they were, that this was it. They were going to reveal themselves to all mankind, that this mothership would, in fact, just sit there for 72 hours and let people look at it and examine it. And this would be the tipping point that we were in human evolution. And she was, she's beside herself because she believed it. And she goes, I no longer am able to